When J.K. Rowling speaks, a fascist lies. I don't make the rules, that's just how things are at this point, at least based on the evidence available. And there's really no better example of this than her continued attacks on trans people and trans healthcare, as we'll see in today's video. But first, a quick content warning for the following: transmisia, suicide, gatekeeping, and medical violence. If our work has helped you, please consider supporting us via Patreon so that we can keep the channel running. You can also help us by liking, commenting, and sharing our work on social media. I'd also just like to take this time to remind our viewers that the statements made throughout our videos are the opinions of myself, the host, based on the evidence I have available to me. They are not and should not be taken as unquestionable fact, which is why we reference everything, because we're fallible. Thus we strive to give you, the viewer, the ability to check all evidence yourself in order to make up your own mind, which is what the reference numbers in the top left corner are for, being numbers that match up with the reference list found in the transcript linked down below. As such, we encourage all our viewers to do their own research to reach an informed conclusion about the topic. Hi there, my name is Ethel Thurston, she, her, they, them, and we're here to once again debunk J.K. Rowling's bullshit, which is pretty much an Olympic sport at this point. Today's video centers on a post J.K. Rowling made to Twitter, in which she shared a screenshot of a New York Times article, while stating sarcastically that, quote, "We must not publish a study that says we're harming children, because people who say we're harming children will use the study as evidence that we're harming children, which might make it difficult for us to continue harming children." End quote. The headline: US study on puberty blockers goes unpublished because of politics, doctor says, followed by a subheading that clarified, quote, "The leader of the long-running study said that the drugs did not improve mental health in children with gender distress, and that the findings might be weaponized by opponents of the care." End quote. Which would lead any reasonable person to ask, what harm is J.K. Rowling talking about? To be clear, I fully understand the implication here, with the article's author, Azim Qureshi, being a well-documented anti-trans writer. Both Qureshi and Rowling are clearly insinuating that, since puberty blockers didn't improve the mental health of trans youth, that is evidence that said medications are ineffective and thus harmful. There's just one problem. That's not how preventative medicine works. Preventative medications, such as puberty blockers, are used to prevent health from deteriorating, keeping someone from sinking below a healthy baseline. In this, they act like a life vest, keeping a person's head safely above water. Complaining that a preventative medication like puberty blockers, insulin, or antidepressants don't extend things beyond a healthy baseline is like pointing to a life vest and arguing that, since it's not causing people to magically rise into the air like a jetpack, said life vest is ineffective and thus harmful. That's absurd, and the author knows this. We know she knows this since the article lays out that, quote, "The researchers follow the children for 2 years to see if the treatments improve their mental health. An older Dutch study had found that puberty blockers improved well-being, results that inspired clinics around the world to regularly prescribe the medications as part of what is now called gender-affirming care. But the American trial did not find a similar trend," Dr. Olson Kennedy said in a wide-ranging interview. Puberty blockers did not lead to mental health improvements, she said, most likely because the children were already doing well when the study began. "They're in really good shape when they come in, and they're in really good shape after 2 years, said Dr. Olson Kennedy, who runs the country's largest youth gender clinic at the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. End quote, before going on to add that, quote, "Dr. Tishelman also noted that, even if the drugs did not lead to psychological improvements, they may have prevented some of the children from getting worse. No change isn't necessarily a negative finding. There could be a preventative aspect to it," she said. "We just don't know without more investigation." End quote. So we see that these children had a healthy baseline and that they remained healthy whilst on puberty blockers. Compare this to the general trans population, the vast majority of which are forced to undergo natal puberty, which, when coupled with discrimination, creates the conditions in which as much as 50% of trans youth have attempted suicide at least once in the past year. That's half. 1 in every 2 children. And it isn't just attempted suicides either. Following the now overturned 2021 ban on puberty blockers in the UK, 16 children took their own lives out of desperation and hopelessness. Hopelessness created by a denial of said essential medications. That is the alternative being pushed here: children with high levels of anxiety, depression, and suicide. So contrary to what Guraishi incorrectly asserted about the Dutch study, puberty blockers weren't turned to as a means of improving the mental health of trans youth, but rather to prevent the deterioration of mental health, whilst alleviating the concerns of cis-normative society. And that last bit truly highlights the irony here. Prior to puberty, trans youth supported by their families in socially transitioning display similar mental health as their cisgender peers. This changes as we enter trans stage 2, which is when secondary sexual characteristics begin to develop, changes that result in a marked degradation of mental health among trans teens as their body develops along the wrong path, causing gender dysphoria. This, plus societal discrimination, has resulted in the 50% attempted suicide rate mentioned earlier. The fair solution to this would be to place trans youth on HRT, allowing them to go through the puberty of their choice alongside their peers. Now, there is no reason to think that this isn't safe, yet cis people argued against it, asserting, without evidence, that a cis child might accidentally transition, find themselves unhappy with their body, and therefore we should take a wait-and-see approach. That's where puberty blockers came in, having originally been developed for cisgender children who suffer precocious or early onset puberty. Children who suffer precocious puberty suffer high levels of psychological distress caused by going through puberty so young, which is why said fully reversible medications are used to delay said puberty for several years, preventing their distress. Seeing their success, doctors realized they could use those very same medications to help trans youth, giving them up to 4 years to mature and work alongside doctors to make a more informed choice. Puberty blockers are not a solution, they're a delay until that solution, i.e. HRT, can be administered. It's worth pointing out that, out of all the patients put on puberty blockers by the previously mentioned Dutch study, 100% went on to further transition via HRT with no known regret. This is possible because doctors identified key differences they could use to help them figure out which children would benefit from HRT and which wouldn't. And yet, in spite of having 100% accuracy on record, puberty blockers remain the default treatment as a precaution purely to ease the minds of cis people. Thankfully, they work, preventing the deterioration of mental health in trans youth as intended. Though, again, even if they didn't, the fair solution would be to start said children on HRT so that they could go through puberty at the same time as all their peers. And to be clear, we wouldn't expect this to magically increase said child's happiness above their peers, merely keep it the same, as they're just another child going through puberty. That's all HRT is. Okay, well, if that's the case, why then did the Dutch study, and indeed many studies, such as one we'll see later, show an improvement in mental health? Well, there are a number of explanations, one of them being the age of the child and just how far into puberty they were when they were put on blockers. The longer natal puberty continues, the more severe the gender dysphoria is likely to be, the greater the distress. If a child is put on blockers shortly after the changes begin, as seems to be the case in this study, with the average age of those considered for the study being 11, keeping in mind that Tanner stage 2 begins around 11 to 12 years, that prevents said deterioration. However, if a child is put on them at a later date, this relief, even though it doesn't reverse the changes already inflicted, is still likely to offer some degree of catharsis in that things are no longer getting worse, and there's now the promise of HRT on the horizon. Returning to my life vest analogy, imagine we're talking about those inflatable ones like you get on planes. If you have 2 children about to jump in the water, one who has their vest blown up and one who doesn't, the one who doesn't is going to sink, which in this analogy refers to a breakdown in mental health. However, if they inflate their vest whilst under the water, two things happen. First, they stop sinking, and second, they begin rising to the surface. They might not make it all the way before they move on to HRT, which is equivalent to someone reaching down to pull them out, but it's not surprising to see some improvement. So yeah, Rowling lied about the study and by extension puberty blockers in general, a lie that Guraishi enabled via her poor journalism. Puberty blockers are quite literally a compromise made by the trans community to alleviate the fears of cis people, yet that compromise is now being unfairly demonized. That's how bad things are. Yet the problems with the article don't end there. For example, the claim that the study has been halted for fear that it might be abused in the very way both Guraishi and Rowling are currently doing is an unsubstantiated claim, with the article acknowledging that, quote, Dr. Olson Kennedy said that she intends to publish the data, but that the team had also been delayed because the NIH had cut some of the project's funding. She attributed that cut to politics, which the NIH denied. The broader project has received $9.7 million in government support to date. End quote. So the claim that said study was blocked to prevent the findings from coming out is just speculation, but since it's a doctor behind said speculation, that offers said speculation an air of legitimacy that it need not necessarily have. Doctors can be just as wrong as anybody else, especially when it comes to matters outside of their field. I mean, just consider Dr. Olson Kennedy's decision to talk to Guraishi when her anti-trans reputation is well known, only for her to go ahead and prove us right. Part of me has to question whether Dr. Olson Kennedy has seen the money on offer by far-right groups such as the Heritage Foundation and is considering making the switch. Another issue can be seen in a gross misportrayal of the Dutch study, seen in quote, in the 1990s and 2000s, doctors in the Netherlands began studying a small group of children who had experienced intense gender dysphoria since early childhood. For most of these children, the negative feelings dissipated by puberty. For others, puberty made them feel worse. End quote. Contrary to what Guraishi states, the children who desisted had not shown signs of intense gender dysphoria since early childhood. For you see, whilst the 2011 study does, in fact, use the term gender dysphoria, this was before said term took on a clinical meaning in the DSM-5, which was published in 2013. Therefore, it fell on researchers to operationalize said terms however they felt. That's why, when discussing persisting and desisting rates of gender dysphoria, the qualifier for gender dysphoria in said paper was any child who had been referred to a gender identity clinic for assessment after displaying gender atypical behavior. Said referral could be made by literally anyone in said child's life, a parent, a teacher, or a counselor, none of which are trained to identify clinical gender dysphoria, not least on account of the fact that said clinical diagnosis didn't exist at the time. The doctors then sorted through these children, which is when they noticed key differences, allowing them to send the majority of children home without further support, which are the desisters, the children Guraishi is referring to when she claims that most of them were fine by puberty. Here are the researchers discussing one such difference. Quote, a marked difference between the reports of persisters and desisters was that the persisters reported that the discomfort was caused by the fact that their bodies did not conform to their feelings, whereas the desisters did not report this. End quote. So the study made it very clear that the desisters did not, in fact, experience intense gender dysphoria since early childhood. That is a complete fabrication on Guraishi's part. It was the persisters, the ones who displayed discomfort at their body not conforming to their mind, who were then put on puberty blockers, with 100% of them going on to further transition via HRT. So the very opposite of what she's claiming. Speaking of complete fabrications, what post-2024 discussion on puberty blockers would be complete without the Cass review, with the article stating that, quote, Dr. Hilary Cass, a pediatrician who this year published an extensive review of youth gender services in England, said that the delays from the American and British research groups had led the public to believe that puberty blockers improve mental health, even though scant evidence backed up that conclusion. It's really important we get results out there so we understand whether it's helpful or not, and for whom, Dr. Cass said. Her reports found weak evidence for puberty blockers and noted some risks, including lags in bone growth and fertility loss in some patients. It prompted the National Health Service in England to stop prescribing the drugs outside of a new clinical trial, following similar pushbacks in several other European countries. End quote. To call the Cass review extensive really reveals just how ignorant or downright dishonest Greishi really is. Starting with the science, the Cass review straight up lied about the system it purportedly used to rate the available evidence, the one thing the review was set up to do. Cass claimed to be using Gray to rate said evidence as low, moderate, and high quality. She then claimed that since she could find no high-quality evidence, namely double-blind randomized control trials, that there was scant evidence to support the use of puberty blockers. The problem is, she found an absolute wealth of both low and moderate quality studies, nearly all of which supported their use, and, as is explicitly stated as part of the grade rating system, quote, although higher quality evidence is more likely to be associated with strong recommendations than lower quality evidence, a particular level of quality does not imply a particular strength of recommendation. Sometimes low or very low quality evidence can lead to a strong recommendation. End quote. So she just straight up lied about her own methodology in order to fabricate the narrative that there was scant evidence, knowing full well that the majority of people wouldn't bother to check her work in full. What's worse, however, is the fact that she revealed just how much of a hack she is. For you see, it's clinically impossible to run double-blind RCTs on puberty blockers, a fact we have known for more than 20 years. The reason being that the medications themselves are known to work, at least chemically. That's not what these trials are testing. They're testing the psychological impact said medications have. This is a problem since, if a child is placed on a placebo, they will begin to see changes in their body as puberty takes place, making it impossible to hide said effects in order to maintain the placebo. This is why a 2001 study on the psychological impact of puberty blockers in children suffering precocious puberty quite literally fell apart and had to change its focus. The children receiving a placebo realized they were on a placebo and dropped out of the study to seek said medical care from a different source. You can't run a double blind on puberty blockers, not for cis children suffering precocious puberty, not for trans children, a fact Hilary Cass would have known had she done elementary research on the subject, suggesting that she A, didn't do said elementary research, or B, did, and lied about it. Fact is, she referenced another review which she herself referred to as, quote, an update to the NICE review, end quote, the NICE review being her own breakdown of the evidence for her report, specifically the one relating to puberty blockers. That review found 50 papers, 24 of which were found to be of low quality and were ignored, with 25 being marked as moderate quality and 1 being of high quality. So, did Hilary Cass make use of said 26 studies? Of course not. She completely ignored them. And in case you're like me and are wondering if it had anything to do with that high quality study, that maybe it contradicted the vast wealth of other studies that support puberty blockers, said study found that, quote, transgender adolescents show poorer psychological well-being before treatment, but show similar or better psychological functioning compared with cisgender peers from the general population after the start of specialized transgender care involving puberty suppression, end quote, emphasis added by me. Again, completely ignored, in spite of it being a high-quality study by her own admission. Which brings us to Hilary Cass's undeclared conflict of interest. For whilst Cass has taken to presenting herself as an objective authority who came into things without prejudice, her colleagues called her out on this, with two of them stating that, quote, Dr. Cass expressed her dismay and shock at the practice of medical transitioning to one of us before she started this review, and recommended strongly that we read the gender-critical polemic, Irreversible Damage, on the subject. She is described on the Cass Review website as an expert who came in with no fixed views. We will leave it to the reader to draw their own conclusions. End quote. Emphasis added by me. Irreversible Damage is an anti-trans propaganda piece that presents all trans men as weak-minded girls who have been duped into believing that they are trans. This is part of a fascist ideology that views said girls as a sexual resource that must be guarded from a Jewish cabal that is supposedly carrying out said indoctrination in an effort to reduce white fertility. That is the ideological nature of the piece Hilary Cass was caught promoting. So she was already set against the trans community before she was selected for her position. This needs to be kept in mind, especially in light of the fact that a Freedom of Information request revealed that only one person was ever considered for the post, that being Hilary Cass. This, by the way, tracks with a post made to Twitter by the now former Minister for Women and Equalities, Kemi Badenoch, in which she openly declared the following about how the Cass review was able to take place and reach the conclusions that it did. Quote, The third reason was having gender-critical men and women in the UK government, holding the positions that mattered most in equalities and health. You only need to look at what the SNP did in Scotland to see what would have happened had we not intervened. The Cass review would have never been commissioned under a Labour government. Labour did not want to know. We had incredible opposition from the system on everything. It was when the ministers changed that everything changed. End quote. Openly confessing what every trans person already knew, that the then Tory government had used corrupt means to stack the deck in favour of gender-critical fascism. This then allowed them to hire Hilary Cass, a non-professional in the relevant fields, as a medical hitman, with Cass being rewarded for unleashing such horrific violence upon the trans community, violence which has already killed 16 children, with peerage. So maybe if Guraishi wanted to do some actual journalism for once, she'd follow up on said corruption and how said internationally rebuked report, currently under investigation by the British Medical Association, is being allowed to dictate medicine and harm children. Indeed, J.K. Rowling has been very happy with said corruption, framing the government's attempts to force trans support charity Mermaid to deny the science on puberty blockers as a return to rationality, while Scotland has put a halt to all medical referrals of trans people under the age of 25. So we're no longer talking about minors, but adults. Yet, as was pointed out to me in the comments on our other videos, the gender-critical crowd has really shown their hand with the Cass review. The fact that Hilary Cass couldn't find a single genuine thing to discredit gender-affirming care, including puberty blockers, in spite of having spent literal years attempting to do so, is confirmation that there isn't anything. Because if there was, they would have found it and presented said evidence rather than lying about their grading method, exposing their ignorance of double-blind RCTs, and relying on pretending to be unbiased when they very clearly were. But I think that's going to have to be the end of things. Even though there's still so much crap in this article, I just can't bring myself to keep going. I think I covered all the major points, so I'm gonna have to wrap things up here. Though what do you think? What are your thoughts on Rowling and her lies about the study? How do you feel about Azim Guraishi's article? Will the Cass review ever die, and if so, how? Did you notice something I missed? If so, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. And if you appreciate what we do here and want to help keep us running, please consider becoming one of our wonderful patrons who make our work possible. You can also make a one-time donation via PayPal or Super Thanks on YouTube. On that note, we'd just like to thank the following people: Matthew Kovac, Hannah Banghart, Goddess Alita, Sosh Daniels, Flynn and Higgins a Seagull. And for myself, Edita and Levi, take care now.